So kind of all of those factors were the reason why I decided to launch this specific product, as well as, of course, the lack of, healthy, sustainable, well-textured vegan cheese options in the market right now that are also specifically shelf stable, which lowers the overarching footprint of the product. So hydrofluorocarbons are 9,000 times more impactful than carbon dioxide, and they're released into the atmosphere through refrigeration in the grocery channel annually. So by being shelf stable, even once the container's opened, our products are inherently more sustainable than what you would purchase in a refrigerator section.
Hey, and welcome to the Made to Sustain podcast. I'm your host, Kelly D'Amico, and I'm so excited to introduce to you today's guest, Ali Elliott, who owns Farmer Foodie, which is a vegan cashew parm. We've worked with Ali a number of times before, and she's got a super amazing product. I really love it. And today we're going to talk about the really important issue around ethical sourcing and human rights, and how do you avoid that in the supply chain. I think this topic is really important because it's really overlooked. It's been talked about for a number of years with fair trade organizations, but I think it's becoming more prominent across various industries. So I'm really excited to talk to you about how she established these practices in her own brand and how she actually studied it in her master's program. So tune in. I think this is a really interesting topic, and Ali is a great guest, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the Made to Sustain podcast. I'm your host, Kelly D'Amico, and I'm so excited to introduce to you Ali Elliott from Farmer Foodie. Hey Ali.
Hey Kelly, thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Of course, I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
Maybe you can give our listeners a brief introduction of who you are.
Of course. So I am Allison Elliott, the founder and CEO of Farmer Foodie, and we make and sell deliciously memorable cashew parm products that are shelf-stable, sustainable, and free from dairy and gluten. I actually started my career as an education director at Mackinac Organic Farm in the Hudson Valley of New York. And then I created the farmerfoodie.com as my plant-forward food blog and decided to take it to the next level and become a full-time entrepreneur. So I pursued my MBA in social impact from Brandeis University and launched my line of cashew parm products 5 days before I graduated 2 years ago.
That's so exciting. Happy birthday to cashew parm.
Thank you. We're very excited about our growth and our progress and what's to come next.
Great. Well, I like to start off each show by asking our guests, what is the most interesting thing you've eaten lately?
The most interesting thing that I've eaten lately is local ramps and local morel mushrooms. I really like to forage in the spring months, and I was at a farmer's market in New York recently around Mother's Day and saw ramps and morels and decided to make a nice sautéed dish with them.
That sounds really tasty. I've never had morels or ramps, but I keep seeing them on my Instagram feed as like something I should be trying and eating all of the time. So I hope whatever you made was delicious.
It was delicious. And I've actually foraged for ramps previously, but while foraging, I've never been able to find morels. So I've typically just purchased them, but they're super delicious. Ramps are kind of like a wild onion, and morels are, of course, mushrooms.
Yeah, that's fun though. I feel like that must have been a nice surprise.
Yeah, it was. It was super tasty.
Are you worried about climate change interfering at all with your ability to find morels or ramps?
Yeah, I definitely am. I think that climate change is impacting all sorts of food production across the globe. And of course, it will impact foraging as well. I also think that the rise in knowledge of ramps on social media has contributed to a spike in foraging for them and foraging for them improperly, where people are actually pulling out the roots. That way, they're not regenerating the following year. So, kind of learning ahead of time about foraging and good foraging practices is important to maintain those food sources. And, I used to be the education director on an organic farm, so really focused on sustainability. So I understand that agriculture is actually one of the leading causes of climate change. So it's kind of a cycle where we're contributing to climate change, and then climate change is making it more difficult for farmers to actually have a successful season.
Wow, that's quite a bit there. I'm really excited to have you on today to talk about the topic of ethical sourcing and how that affects social impact. So super topical that you're here today.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
Great. So tell me about, before we get into some of the challenges with social impact in a food brand, can you talk to me a little bit about Cashew Parm and what it is and how did you get the idea for it?
Of course. So, as a recipe developer, during COVID more specifically, I was making a lot of vegan cheese recipes and realized that I was actually sticking to a vegan diet because I was mainly cooking in my home. And my go to recipes were a vegan cashew mac and cheese sauce, vegan parmesan made from cashews, ricotta, queso, all made from cashews. They were super delicious and really satisfied my craving for cheese. So I realized that there was a gap in the marketplace for tasty, well textured, healthy, clean, organic vegan cheese options. And I initially thought about launching a line of boxed mac and cheese because, like I said, that was one of my favorite recipes, but quickly decided to pivot to shelf stable cashew parm, which can actually be hydrated with water and turned into, for our golden cheddar flavor, a queso mac and cheese or a spread, which just depends on the quantity of water that you mix in, and for our Italian herb, an Alfredo dip or ricotta cheese. So it's simple, delicious, and very accessible and satisfies consumers' cravings for cheese.
That's great. And I feel like during COVID and even still today, the options for clean label vegan cheese or just vegan cheese in general, your options for a good source are quite limited. And I always feel that Cashew Parm does a great job delivering on that.
Thank you. We love to hear that.
Yeah. And last year, I remember you served it over popcorn, and that is still to this day my favorite way to eat it.
Consumers love it on popcorn. They really do. And golden cheddar is probably the most popular flavor for popcorn, but our Italian herb is also really nice. It has zesty pizza vibes.
Cool. Which one out of the golden cheddar and the Italian herb is your favorite?
It's hard to pick a favorite because I use both for various occasions. So when I'm making, Italian based dishes, I'll use the Italian herb. I also really love to make artichokes and then microwave vegan butter and add the Italian herb to the vegan butter to dip the artichokes in. That's one of my favorite ways to eat it. And the golden cheddar more so for, tacos, burritos, popcorn, of course. So it just varies, and I don't think I could live without either of the flavors.
That's great. And I know I've definitely seen you before carrying around with you everywhere you go. So I think that's a versatile and portable.
Yes, it could be a purse parm.
I love that. Cool. So I know it's quite a jump to go from having a food blog and a website where you're doing recipe creation to doing scale up. So how did you take that first initial step to decide to go from, recipe creation and website management? That's a lot of what I do on Made to Sustain, right? And how did you decide that that was the route you wanted to go, is to create a CPG product?
I knew that I wanted to create some sort of business. And while I was in grad school for 2 years, I did build out financial projections for various sustainable food business ideas that I had. And I also did an independent study project on Farmer Foodie as the food blog specifically to figure out how I could monetize it. And I kind of felt like there was sort of no way to grow my food blog personally, and decided that launching a consumer packaged goods product was the best avenue with lower barriers to entry to start from a capital perspective and also access to sales channels. So we really started off selling at farmers markets, which was really great. I consider the first year of Farmer Foodie to be more of a prototype phase where we tested our initial branding. We spoke to consumers. We got their feedback on what they thought about the product, and we tested online sales. And of course, we were continuing to make recipes and promoting the recipes at the farmers markets. But we were definitely kind of keeping it small to start just to see what potential we had and where we should go from there. And we decided to launch a rebranded and expanded product line, which includes golden cheddar, but also our new Italian herb flavor. About a year later, in June 2023, it's retail ready. It sparks consumer interest within 3 seconds of seeing the packaging. We're trademarking the cashew parm category, and we're early movers, and there's minimal competition in the industry. So, kind of all of those factors were the reason why I decided to launch this specific product, as well as, of course, the lack of, healthy, sustainable, well textured vegan cheese options in the market right now that are also specifically shelf stable, which lowers the overarching footprint of the product. So, hydrofluorocarbons are 9,000 times more impactful than carbon dioxide, and they're released into the atmosphere through refrigeration in the grocery channel annually. So, by being shelf stable, even once the container's opened, our products are inherently more sustainable than what you would purchase in a refrigerator section.
I think that's important to note because a lot of times people assume shelf-stable products are, more heavily processed, bad for you. There's this negative connotation. When I went to school for food science, one of my freshman year classes, they took us to a grocery store and had us walk around the store and explain the purpose of the layout and why things are the way that they are. And I remember our professors always telling us that consumers more recently have been shying away from the center of the store because of that connotation. But I think it's important to understand the impact of how energy intensive the resource supply chain is for refrigerated products. Also, for the liability that comes with refrigerated products, too. You have a shorter shelf life. If the truck breaks down or the temperature's not at where it should be, you have to throw all of that out. So there's a big issue there, not only with the fluorocarbons, but the energy to power those trucks is more intensive, and all these nuances you don't think about when you're sourcing materials.
Yeah. And there's also, more economic costs affiliated with cold chain freight. So consumers that are purchasing these products that are in the refrigerator sect are purchasing from brands that need to spend more to get the product to them. And of course, the freight also increases the footprint of the products. And really, our cashew parm products are simple, straightforward. Our ingredients are healthy and they're inherently sustainable. So it's cashews, nutritional yeast, salt, pepper, onion, garlic. Our golden cheddar has turmeric. Our Italian herb has oregano, basil, red pepper. So all of these ingredients you would find on the shelf regardless.
They're all pretty well recognized pantry staples, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a totally different world going from recipe development online, buying ingredients at the grocery store, to being able to buy them scale for manufacturing purposes. There's a big difference. How did you go about selecting the right suppliers to ensure that it aligned with, your MBA program for social impact?
Well, I knew that I wanted the ingredients, as many as possible, to be organic. Ideally, we would be sourcing regenerative organic ingredients, but the supply chain for our ingredients doesn't currently exist. I actually decided to kind of kill two birds with one stone with a project that I had for my MA in Sustainable International Development my final semester, when I was also working on launching Farmer Foodie as a cashew parm brand. And I analyzed the cashew industry, and specifically our cashew supplier, which is in Benin, Africa. And I realized that cashew trees are carbon negative because they retain carbon stock, they create shade coverage, they're drought resistant. And our cashews are coming straight from Benin to Georgia to us in Rhode Island, which is where our current co-manufacturer is. So the supply chain itself has a lower footprint because it's direct from Africa, whereas 98% of the cashews grown in Benin are exported to India or Vietnam to be shelled. So they have a 3 to 5 times larger mass, which increases the footprint because, of course, there's more space being taken up for air freight. And then they're also exporting jobs, and they wind up shipping the shelled cashews to Europe and the United States after that, which increases the overarching footprint. So our supplier in Benin, They are, of course, fair trade organic and carbon negative. Our cashews are carbon negative when harvested, but they also have a retail presence. 10% of all of their retail profits go to their nonprofit that's in Benin that supports the female community there. They offer job opportunities to women in the community, and they educate them to do things like learn how to use the computer. And they also help their 7,000 farmer network get their fair trade and organic certifications and maintain those. So they're creating more economic opportunities and educational opportunities and contributing to a lower carbon footprint.
I think there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe we can take a step back and talk about the cashew harvesting process.
Yeah, so cashews are actually grown out of an apple and they have a shell on them. So once the cashews are harvested, they need to be shelled and then processed.
And you can eat the fruit.
Yeah, you can actually eat the fruit. So I would assume, I'm not 100% sure, that the farmers mainly eat the fruit. I don't know if our cashew supplier has any sort of operations with the fruit in the country, but I think it's really awesome that there's a dual bounty affiliated with harvesting cashews.
Yeah, I agree. And the cashew fruit, I've eaten it before. It's so tasty. It's like citrusy and light, and it has this really crazy texture that's like fleshy and different than anything I've ever had.
I would love to try it. I should also note that our supplier in Benin is the second largest processing facility in the country.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So it sounds like your supplier in Benin is really self-conscious and self-aware of their social impact within the community. Was that a deciding factor for you in selecting them over maybe another supplier?
Yes, it definitely was. And actually, the founder of the company was in the Peace Corps, and I believe he did Peace Corps in Benin. And that's when he decided to launch this company a few years after. And I think he probably just saw the need for more economic opportunities and educational opportunities and sort of wanted to give back and pay it forward and generate sort of a community around cashews.
Nice. That's really wholesome. Human rights are something that come up a lot of the time when we're sourcing ingredients from outside of the US because you never truly know. Was that an issue for you at all and or a deciding factor for you?
Of course. So in the cashew processing and farming industry, there is a lot of forced labor and child labor affiliated with production. And I wanted to make sure that our supplier was fair trade, that they were making a positive social impact, that they were contributing to the community. And they really are. You know, they hold the hands of the farmers and help them attain their fair trade and organic certifications and really walk them through the process. And to me, it feels like these farmers become lifetime partners of our supplier in Benin. And I actually did a project in grad school with a company called Chica Bean. It's a coffee roaster and grower that employs female farmers in Guatemala. And so, kind of going to Guatemala with my consulting team, experiencing Chica Bean firsthand, seeing like these farmers where they live, how they harvest, how they produce, that kind of struck something in that made me even more inclined to find a very ethical cashew supplier. Although I have not been to this cashew production facility in Benin, it's definitely something that I have on my bucket list as time goes on. And also as we determine the best path for us to become carbon neutral and assess our overarching carbon footprint.
Awesome. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced? You mentioned a couple ingredients in your formula, right, that people recognize. Were there any other ingredients that you were concerned about their social impact, or was it mainly the cashews?
It was mainly the cashews. This isn't necessarily social impact related, but a challenge that we have experienced was with nutritional yeast. I guess it kind of is because I really wanted to source everything organic. And so I sought out organic nutritional yeast suppliers for at least 3 days, it feels like. We ordered organic nutritional yeast. We tested organic nutritional yeast at our co-packing facility, and the flavor profile is just completely different from just conventional nutritional yeast. So we decided not to pursue that avenue. And also, cost was a huge barrier for organic nutritional yeast. And I think that's a gap in the supply chain that if someone out there is listening and wants to start a company, could be solved. And that was one of our major barriers. And when we first started, I was sourcing all of the ingredients. I was managing all of the ingredients. We were working with a very small scale, almost prototype kind of nonprofit, community driven co-packer in Greenfield, Massachusetts called FCCDC. And as time went on, we sort of graduated from that phase. We had our recipe down. We knew exactly how to produce the product. And we went to a production manufacturer in Georgia. And then from there, we actually found our current co-packer, which is in Lincoln, Rhode Island, only 50 minutes away from me in Waltham, Massachusetts. And it's super convenient. They're very diligent. They're great. We have a very good relationship with them. And I think this is really the point where Farmer Foodie is going to begin to scale.
That's great. It seems to me like impacting local communities is something really important to you and to Farmer Foodie. So how is Georgia on your list of places to manufacture?
It was on the list because it's extremely difficult to find a co-packer that can produce the quantities that you're looking to produce at the right price point, with the right ingredients, with the right certifications. And it took me at least a year to figure out who our ultimate co-packer would be. I had multiple conversations with various co-packers, tested multiple things at various locations from a recipe perspective, and ultimately just kind of happened upon our co-packer in Lincoln, Rhode Island that focuses on vegan cheese and vegan products specifically. And the relationship just kind of wound up working out. And yeah, it's just difficult to find a co-packer that suits your needs. And I think our product, fortunately, is probably a bit more accessible from a production standpoint. Whereas, I don't know, dumplings might be more difficult to find a co-packer for at scale.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to note that the network of co-manufacturers or just manufacturing networks in general is so huge and so diverse and so specific that it all depends on where you are in your process, who has time on the line, who can take you in. It's so challenging. It's like trying to get a reservation at a restaurant and you have the entire country to pick from and everyone wants to eat at the same dinner time. It's so complex.
Yeah, and you need to be able to trust your co-manufacturer. I've heard horror stories about co-manufacturers stealing product recipes, having brands sign various paperwork that is not in their best interest. So we always make sure that our manufacturer signs our NDA before we pursue the conversation further. And the one that we're working with right now is a really great partner. They're really diligent, responsive, and organized, which is beneficial for us in our growth stage.
So how does, outside of sourcing your ingredients, how does Farmer Foodie take social impact into the brand?
Yeah, so I like to say that Farmer Foodie values the triple bottom line, people, planet, product, and put sustainability at the forefront of all business decisions. So since inception, we've really analyzed the best path to be a lower footprint brand. I've had multiple conversations with plastic neutral certifying bodies. So basically, these certification companies will offset the amount of plastic that you as a company is emitting through projects in high risk waste regions like Indonesia or India, where they clean up the exact amount and you get to put this certification on your packaging. So there's an equation and human component affiliated, and it's also an employment opportunity and a way to increase economic value in those countries. We have not done it to date, but as soon as we become sort of more scaled and grow, it's definitely something that we want to do. I've also analyzed compostable packaging and ultimately decided to go with recyclable packaging just because of the current waste recycling systems and behaviors in the United States. I personally think that more consumers are recycling than composting. And I think composting, although it's fantastic, is just not at a place across the country that is accessible for everybody. And I don't think everybody is as educated about it as they are about recycling. Although, of course, we could talk about the issues affiliated with recycling and our existing waste management systems. But that's the reason why I decided to go with recyclable packaging. Compostable packaging cannot be recycled. So recycling is sort of top of mind to some consumers, and ideally our consumers who are purchasing the product because they value the sustainability components affiliated with the brand.
I believe you're 1% for the planet too. Is that correct?
Yep, we're 1% for the planet. We also just got our woman-owned business certification, which is exciting.
Congrats.
We also got, thank you. We also got our gluten-free certification, and we're in the process of getting organic, vegan, and kosher.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
You had some advantages with your graduate program, but I'd say you had to learn a lot of this along the way, right? I feel like that knowledge doesn't just inherently exist. What are some strategies that companies can take, that other food entrepreneurs can take, or large businesses in general? What are some strategies that they can take to ensure that they have ethical sourcing throughout their supply chains?
I think really doing the research is important. I can't tell you how many hours I probably spent researching every single ingredient that went into that first year of production of our it was called everything cheese, but now it's our golden cheddar flavor. So really being willing to kind of learn new things and educate yourself is super important. Put in the work, put in the time, do the research. And then beyond that, I can't stress enough the power of networking. I would have never been able to launch this product within, I believe it was March 10th to May 17th, that time frame, without networking. I was networking with at least 10 new people each week, all in the food industry or founders themselves. I learned about co-packing from somebody who has a company called Top Seeds, which is a seed cracker company. I had no idea what a co-packer was before that conversation. And that was probably, in February of 2022. So talking to people in the industry and asking the right questions that are relevant to your business or your idea at that time is extremely valuable and really what helped me get Farmer Foodie Cashew Parm up and running.
Have there been any particularly inspiring examples of companies that have sourced ethically or messaged the way that they're sourcing ethically?
I think there are a whole slew of companies out there that are, intentionally sourcing either regenerative organic ingredients and sustainable ingredients and becoming carbon neutral. There's none that come to mind that stand out, but there are plenty in the mix that are sort of industry leaders when it comes to these climate neutral or carbon negative or just low footprint products. And I specifically would like to note the regenerative organic products because launching a regenerative organic company requires a lot of legwork. It requires setting up the supply chain on a different level. It requires networking with farmers and actually, maybe signing contracts with those farmers to ensure that they're producing grains that are regenerative organic that will be going to a specific company and key ingredient to their overarching profitability and sales channels and whatnot. So regenerative organic is our ultimate goal. And we'll just have to see how the industry evolves in the United States and across the globe as time goes on.
Yeah, I've had many conversations now on the podcast about regenerative farming, and it takes so much work, more than people realize. Organic's not easy. Regenerative is even harder. So I think it's important to note that it's a journey. It's not an overnight process at all, but it's a great thing to work towards.
Yeah, and I read this statistic once from Rodale Institute, which said that if we as a world decided to switch to regenerative organic agriculture, we could sequester 100% of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. So I think the power of regenerative organic is just, it's so strong and commendable. And it also impacts, like the insects population, the snakes, the field mice. A lot of times conventional agriculture is running over wildlife. And, regenerative, you don't till the soil, so you don't release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and those habitats are maintained for various insects and whatnot.
Yeah, it's much better for the ecosystem and for biodiversity. And I think biodiversity is one of those topics that's really undervalued right now, but will be sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
How do you educate consumers on the benefits of ethically sourced products, right? A lot of times people are going to see the cost of a carbon neutral product or a regenerative ag product or something like fair trade is going to be more expensive. How do you convince people or educate people that it's worth the extra cost, it's worth the added expense?
As of right now, a lot of our sales have been in person at various farmers markets. So I always like to note that we use fair trade organic cashews that are carbon negative when harvested and organic ingredients. And I think consumers are just generally shifting to fair trade and organic products because of the health benefits affiliated. So speaking to consumers one on one about the health components, but then also that this product's shelf stable, it's convenient, it's tasty, it's well textured. As soon as somebody tries it, they love it. And now we're also in some retail locations like Big Y and specialty stores, and we're continuing to grow. And we've been doing stuff on social media, which is sustainability focused in the sense that we're talking about what's in season in April, what's in season in May. We're talking about other sustainable products. We are doing posts for Earth Day. We're trying multiple things right now to discuss sustainability and food, but I think there's more that we could be doing from a social perspective via newsletters or upcycled recipes.
There's always more that you think you can do. Trust me, I've I've been doing this a while, and I am never running short of ideas and things to do.
Yes, me too. I think we actually might be launching a carrot top pesto recipe with our cashew parm, which we're going to drizzle over grilled carrots.
That sounds fantastic, and I love the eating the whole plant rather than parts of the plant.
Exactly. We do too.
Cool. Well, we're running out of time here, so we're going to get wrapping up on a couple of questions. What's something you wish more people knew about food sustainability?
I guess kind of what we were just discussing, which is regenerative organic agriculture and the power affiliated with that and not tilling the soil and how beneficial that is for the environment. Of course, I think a lot of people know that eating local can benefit the overarching footprint of, someone's diet. But even beyond that, I've heard from consumers or just people in general that they don't think their daily dietary decisions make an impact. And I don't agree with that. I've been a vegetarian for probably 12 years now. When I go out, vegan when I'm at home. And I know that my lifestyle decisions have impacted climate change in a positive way because I'm not consuming higher carbon footprint products. So don't undervalue your impact as an individual and your dietary decisions.
I love that. I think that's really important. It's so easy to brush away or brush aside that, it's one paper towel or it's one hamburger. What difference does it make? But in the grand scheme of things, it really does make a difference.
Yeah, I agree with you.
What's the most unconventional way you've seen someone use cashew parm?
I personally have used cashew parm mixed with breadcrumbs and made cauliflower wings with it, which is super delicious. And I guess from a farmer's market consumer conversation perspective, I've heard from a lot of people that they like to put our cashew parm on chicken and fish, which is obviously something that I've never tried. So I would say that's probably the most unconventional way I've seen somebody else use it. But for me, it goes a really long way. Sometimes I mix it into olive oil when I have fresh focaccia.
Yeah, that is kind of funny that you are a vegan forward brand and it's being used on non-vegan products.
Yep, I agree
But
with that.
meet people where they're at, I guess. If they've, reducing the impact with cheese, I don't know. It's fun.
Yeah, reducing their impact with cheese, Also, purchasing a product that tastes good. And we're inclusive. We like people of all diets. So we are happy to receive that type of feedback. And I've told other consumers to use it on chicken and fish if they eat meat, and they do, and they like it. So, you know, we're a brand for everyone.
I love that. That's it for our questions. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight about Farmer Foodie or Cashew Parm and where people can find you?
Yeah, people can find us on thefarmerfoodie.com, which is our direct to consumer website. You can also find us on Amazon if you just search Farmer Foodie or Cashew Parm. You can find us at Big Y and various specialty stores in Vermont, New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. And I really appreciate the time that you spent with me today. And I hope that consumers take away something from our conversation and decide to, put that burger down.
Yeah, I agree, and choose ethically sourced products.
Agreed.
Cool. Thanks so much for coming on today, Ali. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Some of the top things that I learned from this episode are, if you are a food brand, really check your manufacturers and don't be afraid to ask questions. And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. My top 3 things that I learned from today's episode are: don't be afraid to ask questions of your suppliers. If you're a food ingredient company or you're just a consumer in the grocery store, it's okay to ask questions and do a little bit of research on where your ingredients come from and what was the overall cost that it took to get there. The second biggest takeaway from today's episode is that not all ingredients are sourced the same. So ingredients that you might get from Africa are different than ones you might get from South America or from India. And obviously there's different food mileage associated with that, but there's also different sourcing practices that might be associated with each one. So I think it's really important to know where your ingredients are coming from and the overall impact it took to get there. The last takeaway from this episode is that no impact is too small, that collectively all of our small little impacts make a huge difference. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please support our sponsors who help make this show possible, and be sure to check out Farmer Foodie's Cashew Parm either on Amazon or on thefarmerfoodie.com. If you like this podcast, the greatest compliment you can give is by sending it to a friend. Please, please, please give us a rating if you really enjoyed it, and don't forget to check out madetosustain.com for more valuable information on food sustainability. And come back next week where we will be talking to Emma from The Simple Environmentalist. I'm really excited for her episode where we are going to talk about plastic usage in the food system. So thanks so much and come back soon. Bye.